never work, and it's now scared some private investors that, hey, I'm not going to go in there. But he has taken the bold step, and we've seen the banks, consortium of banks, and even the CBN also played their role by, I think, granting about 50 billion Naira credit to also help fund that project. So, and he has also said, hey, I'm not going to come and sell below the official rate. I'm going to sell at the official rate, or I'm not going to come and start selling at 97 Naira. Rather, I'm going to sell to you at the rate unsubsidized. Then you and government, if you're a marketer, you're coming to buy from you and government are going to go and talk about how you're going to get your subsidy. So that's a major strategy that he has put in place too.
So would this not cause some kind of problems for those who probably will be buying from him?
No, it wouldn't. You would rather buy from Analyst because it saves you importation costs, and it saves you transportation costs, it saves you demurrage and whatever at the ports. So it's actually cheaper and efficient for you to actually buy from Analyst Dangote refinery at Olokola, also in Ondo State.
All right. So how will all of this affect his shares? Because this has, of course, since it hasn't materialized properly yet, it isn't listed on the floor. But we have other stocks owned by this group listed on the floor. Now, how is it going to affect these other stocks?
No, I don't. There's no need to start worrying about that because it's an entirely different entity. Except he plans to form a holding company and list them on the stock exchange. There we can now see a spike in its stocks. But for now, no, a Dangote cement, the Dangote sugar is completely different from a Dangote refinery.
All right, still on this report, we know that Nigeria's ranking on the Global Competitiveness Index actually dropped from 115 to 120. What was actually responsible for this?
Well, the Global Competitive Index report is an index that has been completed by the World Economic Forum, and it measures about 185 countries in the world. And Nigeria, like you said, dropped 5 places to 120 this year. And basically, the issues are still the same thing, infrastructure being one of the key issues. We have a huge infrastructure gap. The African Development Bank put an infrastructure deficit to like about $360 billion. So it's that huge, it's that wide. Aside from that, there are bureaucracies. Nigeria, there's still corruption within our systems. So,
but we're not the only country that has, that
exactly
as high as what the World Economic Forum is actually saying. So why does it seem like we're always getting the harder knocks?
Oh, well, again, look at our reforms. A lot of countries actually have reforms, as they initiate reforms and they see it through. A lot of reforms have been put in place in Nigeria and we're yet to see traction. I think the only one that is still moving on course is the power sector. And like you said, we're not expecting to see any dividends yet until the next 2-3 years because it's a long-term thing. So why Nigeria's situation is like this? Because we have a lot of potential. Our GDP growth is at least for Q2, 6.18. But our potential is like 21. So there's like an 11% gap. That shows the suboptimality in Nigeria. So we have so much potentials, but we're not doing anything to harness the potentials and transfer it into actual benefits. So that's why there's so much noise. Like Nigeria has so much to offer, but this is what is happening. There's so many investment opportunities, and investors actually want to come into Nigeria to invest.
Yes, because we remember that when they took this the roadshow, when the Federal Ministry of Finance actually took the roadshow for the €1 billion Euro bonds, we had an oversubscription from the United States. So I'm wondering if all of this is happening, why does it seem that our ranking on a global scale seems not to be commiserate with all of this that is happening now? There's
a lot of uncertainty going on. The perception foreign investors about Nigeria is totally different from, obviously, the way we see ourselves. There's a political, let me say the security uncertainty, rather, what is going on in the north and all that. Any investor will be worried about that, coming to Nigeria and wanting to invest maybe somewhere in the north. Even if it doesn't want to invest in the north, there's the high risk that the attacks might spread to the south. Lagos is the commercial hub of Nigeria. If anything happens, obviously it's going to have a huge impact on Nigeria. So these are some of the things all these foreign investors are looking at. You look at power. Power is a huge variable for any business.
Ongoing reforms are already making sure that we have enough, power generators.
Yes, ongoing reforms are occurring, as in they're going on and all that. As the discos and gencos, they've been able to pay fully and all that, but we're still recording maybe 2,900 megawatts or 3,000 megawatts generation. That's just to show you that what we're seeing here, the so-called reforms, they are yet to translate into actual generation. And that's because there's a disconnect between what is being generated and what is being transmitted and what is getting actually to the end user. So all these loopholes have to be fixed before we can actually see an improvement in power. So we're not expecting anything this year, but in the next 2 years, 3 years, by the time the private investors settle down with their assets and all that and put in place what needs to be done, efficiency or cost, competition generates, then we would see an improvement in power. And obviously, if there's an improvement in power, costs would reduce. You see more efficiency in both in manufacturing, industrial sectors. It cuts across everywhere. And also there are issues like we mentioned subsidy and all that, that there's this mentality that subsidy is going to go on forever. This is something that needs to be done. I think it's Ghana that actually contemplating on completely removing that fuel subsidy. This is something Nigeria also has to do. Now, it's not a matter of if, it's when this is going to happen. Fine, the layman out there might say, oh, you're removing subsidy, you're taking away my own national cake and all that, you're increasing the burden on. But this is something that needs to be done because it's going to reduce the costs that the government is paying. And with the funds that are actually generated from the removal of subsidy, the government can use it to generate or to grow other sectors. It can use it to invest in maybe agriculture or sectors that actually need the funds.
You know, right now the federal government is so passionate about driving agriculture because it wants to diversify away from oil to agriculture. Now, your report actually indicates that many states have exceeded their borrowing limits, as stipulated in the Fiscal Responsibility Act. What's your take on this?
Oh, well, the Fiscal Responsibility Act gives a benchmark of 40% of GDP, and most of the states are around 35%, so you just have a 5% threshold left to operate and all that. And my take on this is we're getting closer to 2015 election and all that, so we're going to see more spending, definitely. And with more spending, there's a high possibility that borrowing would increase because you look at the government revenue, it's declining hugely because of all proceeds. So if your source is declining, what are you going to do to offset that balance? If your revenue falls below its budget, what are you going to do to offset that balance? Obviously, you have to increase borrowing. So it's something that needs to be taken into consideration.
Okay, so now we're going to be increasing borrowing. Let's just talk about the debt performance of the federal government. Is it any better, like for the second quarter?
Well, I don't think it's any better. We've seen increased borrowing. That's we've seen increased borrowing. No, it's not. It hasn't reduced. Yeah, increased borrowing.
That's kind of like put pressure on the economy.
On the economy, and it's also crowding out the private sector and now making them still have to borrow at a higher cost because the government is seen as a safer entity to lend to instead of the private sector. Yeah.
What about government bonds, government equities, fixed bonds and the rest of it? Has that fared any better for the second quarter?
Yes, it has. It's yields have been relatively high, and we've seen bond prices actually drop last week, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. That shows the price has actually come down and the yields went up, and so that's been a good work for them. But that implies that the government might still needs to reduce its borrowing because it's borrowing at a significant high cost. So,
So now your report was for the second quarter of the year. This is the last month of the third quarter of the year. Do we expect to see any improvement from your analysis of Q2? Okay,
let's start with GDP growth. For GDP growth, we're actually estimating a marginal improvement.
How marginal are we talking about?
Marginal, let's say, was 6.1. We're looking at 6.3, 6.4%. So it's marginal, nothing significant compared to previous years that were recording 7% thereabout. And we expect this growth to actually stem from agriculture. We actually expect it to stem from building and construction because we've seen a lot of roads being constructed, a lot of bridges and basically roads, building and construction, so we expect that to increase. And also in tourism and hospitality, we expect growth to stem from that. Then also in the oil sector, because of the marginal increase, in fact, that brief increase in oil prices, we expect there to be some improvement in oil revenue. OPEC's August report stated that Nigeria's production was 1.88 compared to July's when that was 1.87. So that's just like 10,000 barrels per day, not really. So let's just say oil in the oil sector is still going to remain flat because the oil thefts, we haven't really heard much about it, but let's just say it's reduced to a marginal extent and all that. Power sector, well, we'll see how that goes. We'll see how that goes, but we're not expecting any huge jump in generation to 4,000, 5,000 megawatts. We're not expecting anything that significant. In inflation, we've already discussed our forecast. We're estimating 8.64, basically just flat or a marginal decline in that. The MP